My husband owns an estate valued at $160 million, along with this beautiful house, all of which will eventually come to me. Since we don't have any children, everything will be mine. My sister-in-law speaks about this inheritance with a certain pride, her words lingering in my mind. My name is Astred. I'm 44 years old, and I work part-time. My husband and I have two sons. One is a senior in high school, and the other is a sophomore. This year, my oldest son is preparing for his college entrance exams. He has always dreamed of becoming a lawyer and has dedicated himself to that goal since childhood. His ambition to pursue law is largely influenced by my older brother, Johan, who is a lawyer and a few years ago started his own firm, now home to several attorneys. Growing up, my son admired Johan's achievements, and his diligence has always shown through his excellent grades, even in elementary school. When Johan learned of his nephew's aspirations, he was thrilled and offered plenty of encouragement. My son often tells his uncle, "I'll be a lawyer just like you," to which Uncle Johan always laughs and replies, "Well, hurry up and become one so you can follow in my footsteps." Although my brother is married, he and his wife have no children. Whenever he visits, he cherishes spending time with my boys, often indulging them. Johan's wife is 10 years younger than him and has always been a somewhat challenging person. She never comes to our home, which has left our relationship quite distant. Johan and I lost our parents when we were young, so he stepped in as a father figure at my wedding. Shortly after, he married a younger woman. My husband and I were relieved when we heard he was settling down, but I was shocked by how unhappy his fiancée appeared when we finally met her. Rather than the excited bride-to-be we anticipated, she wore a gloomy expression. I tried to be polite, telling her how lovely they looked together, but once we were home I expressed my confusion to my husband. He agreed, noting that she didn't seem like the most pleasant bride, but shrugged it off, suggesting there was nothing we could do. Before getting married, Johan purchased a stunning house, a testament to his success. When my husband and I visited to celebrate, my sister-in-law was conspicuously absent. My husband joked with Johan, asking if his wife had already left him. Although he meant it in jest, the unease that flashed across Johan's face silenced our laughter. He explained that whenever a family event arises, his wife retreats to her parents' home, and on that day she was celebrating her mother's birthday. My husband's shoulders sagged, realizing his joke might have struck a nerve. Then unexpectedly, Johan posed a question that caught us off guard. With a serious expression, he asked if he could adopt one of our children. At first, I thought he was joking, but the earnestness in his eyes revealed he was not. I was unsure how to respond, but my husband laughed and replied, "Who knows what the future holds? We can talk about it if that time comes. If you genuinely want one of our kids, you're welcome to adopt whichever you like." His tone was lighthearted, yet I couldn't shake the unease creeping into my mind. I felt conflicted about the idea of adoption and even more concerned about the state of Johan's marriage. Whenever we visited Johan's house or he came to ours, he was always alone. His wife never accompanied him, and he never mentioned her. I decided not to bring it up either. They had been married for over 10 years, and I had almost forgotten she existed. This year, my oldest son received acceptance into his dream law school, and during a visit to celebrate this milestone, Johan broached the topic of adoption again. Just as before, he asked if I would consider letting him adopt one of my sons. He and his wife hadn't been able to have children, so he was revisiting the question. The last time he had mentioned it, they had just gotten married, and there hadn't seemed to be any urgency. But this time, Johan appeared more determined. My husband, still not taking it seriously, replied casually, "Would you like our eldest son since he wants to be a lawyer?" Although he intended it as a light-hearted comment, I felt uneasy. This was a major life-changing decision for our sons. Even though they would be with Johan, their uncle, I worried about how my sister-in-law would treat a child who wasn't biologically hers. Unable to shake my unease, I asked, "Johan, is your wife okay with the idea of adopting one of my sons?" He gave me a strange smile and said, "Don't worry about her, we've already talked it over." While it was somewhat reassuring to know they had discussed it, I still couldn't make a decision on the spot. I felt it would be best to talk it over with my two sons first. They were old enough to have a say in such a significant decision, and I wanted to ensure they were comfortable with whatever choice we made. We didn't delve deeper into the conversation that day, but just a few days later, I received an urgent call from my brother's law firm. They informed me that he had collapsed. Panic surged through me as I rushed to the hospital. I found some staff from Johan's law firm waiting in the hospital, their faces etched with concern. They explained that my brother had suffered a stroke at work and had lost consciousness. After I arrived, the law firm staff left, but they mentioned they hadn't been able to reach my sister-in-law. I tried calling their landline, but there was no answer, and I didn't have her cell phone number. My husband and our younger son arrived at the hospital later, but despite our efforts, we still couldn't get in touch with my sister-in-law. Eventually, my younger son discovered my brother's smartphone among his belongings. We unlocked it and found her number. When I called using his phone, she answered sharply, "I told you not to call me again. I'll sue you." Her angry tirade left me struggling to respond. Finally, I managed to say, "It's Astrid, Johan's sister." My brother collapsed and was brought to the hospital. Her tone shifted instantly when she recognized my voice. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought it was Johan." "Did you say he collapsed?" I explained his condition and informed her of the hospital he was in, but her response stunned me. "I can't come to the hospital right now. I have things to do. Please let me know if anything changes," she said, and then she hung up. I was left wondering what could possibly be more important than her husband lying unconscious in the hospital. It became clear that my sister-in-law would not be of any help, so we decided to take matters into our own hands. My eldest son had just finished his university entrance exams, so he offered to visit my brother every day on my behalf. Despite our hopes, my brother never regained consciousness and remained in critical condition. Throughout this ordeal, my sister-in-law never called or visited the hospital, not even once. About a week after my brother was hospitalized, I called her again. This time she answered the phone with an almost cheerful tone. "What's up? Did he die?" Her callousness left me seething, but I kept my voice steady. "He's still alive. Why didn't you come to the hospital?" Her response dripped with irritation as she said, "I'm not a doctor or a healer. There's nothing I can do." Her cold attitude made my anger boil over, and I abruptly ended the call. In that moment, I began to suspect that my brother's desire to adopt one of my sons might stem from a strained relationship with his wife. Perhaps he had given up on the idea of having children with her. When I asked Johan how he met his wife, he mentioned they had connected through a marriage counseling agency. It occurred to me that she might have married him for his success as a lawyer, seeking the lifestyle that accompanied it. The thought only fueled my frustration. When I shared my concerns with my husband, he revealed something even more disturbing. If Johan dies, his wife will inherit everything since they don't have any children. This realization weighed heavily on me. Perhaps that was why Johan had brought up the adoption idea again during our recent celebration of our son's success. I couldn't shake the feeling that I should have made a decision then, but now it felt too late. After Johan's visit, I casually mentioned the adoption idea to my sons. To my surprise, my younger son was open to it. Unlike his older brother, he didn't have any specific goals and seemed to think that being adopted by Johan might provide him an easier life. I had expected my eldest son, who idolized Johan, to be the one interested in adoption, but his response caught me off guard. "I don't want to be adopted. I want to take care of you and Dad." His words filled me with joy, yet deep down, I knew that if anyone should be adopted by Johan, it should be my eldest son, who shared his passion for law. Despite my conflicted feelings, there was nothing I could do. My brother remained unconscious, and I couldn't finalize an adoption on his behalf. I had no interest in my brother's inheritance, but I also didn't want my sister-in-law, who seemed so eager for his demise, to receive a single penny. All I could do was hope for my brother's recovery, but sadly, he never woke up. A few days later, I found myself faced with the heartbreaking task of informing my sister-in-law of his passing. When I called to share the news, her unsettling cheerfulness caught me off guard. "Oh, that's unfortunate. What about the funeral?" she asked casually. I was taken aback by her lack of emotion as she added, "You can handle everything. Just don't make me a pallbearer. I don't want to deal with any of the formalities." My temper flared, but before I could respond, she quickly hung up. In the end, my husband and I were left to plan the funeral ourselves. The staff from my brother's law firm were incredibly supportive, assisting us in numerous ways. My husband expressed concern about the firm's future, but we learned that my brother had already made arrangements for its management. Although he was the representative lawyer, he had entrusted the day-to-day operations to someone else, ensuring its continued success even after his passing. The firm, which my brother had worked so hard to build, would continue operating smoothly as a corporation. The turnout at the funeral was overwhelming. So many people attended that the wreaths couldn't all fit in the hall, a powerful testament to how respected and loved my brother was. My sons helped out during the service, but I noticed that my younger son seemed particularly frustrated as he scanned the room filled with prominent figures, corporate presidents, politicians, and other influential people. He muttered under his breath, "I shouldn't have been adopted. I didn't realize how incredible Uncle Johan was." Both my husband and I understood his regret. He had missed an opportunity he hadn't fully appreciated until now. As I served as a pallbearer, I noticed that no one inquired about my sister-in-law's absence, as if she didn't even exist. My brother and his wife had never had a wedding. They had only gone on a honeymoon. Perhaps even some relatives weren't aware of their marriage. Reflecting on the situation, I couldn't help but wish my brother had never married her. What was the point of a wife who didn't even attend her husband's funeral? I also regretted not allowing my brother to adopt my younger son sooner, fearing that my sister-in-law would now claim everything my brother had worked for. With the help of the law firm staff, we managed to arrange the funeral. Afterward, I invited everyone back to my brother's house for a meal to thank them for their support. My brother can rest in peace because of all of you, I said, though the sadness in the room was palpable. Just then, my sister-in-law made her entrance, dressed in an outrageously bright pink coat. She strode in with a beaming smile, as if she had perfectly timed her arrival to coincide with the end of the funeral. I couldn't contain my frustration any longer and confronted her. "Why are you here now, after everything's over?" With a loud, almost triumphant tone that echoed in the room, she declared, "My husband's estate, worth $160 million, along with this house, will be passed on to me, his wife. Since we don't have any children, everything is mine." She seemed to revel in the attention, but to our astonishment, the staff from the law firm burst into laughter. We were all bewildered, unsure why they found her statement so amusing. My sister-in-law, visibly irritated, shot them an icy glare and snapped, "What exactly are you laughing at? You're being rude." One of the lawyers, still smirking, replied calmly, "We all know that you're officially divorced. We were aware of the terms of your divorce settlement." I gasped, unable to hide my disbelief. "You were divorced?" I blurted out, glancing at my sister-in-law, who had turned as pale as a ghost. She stared at the lawyers with a look of pure fury, her teeth clenched in anger. Another lawyer chimed in, "Yes, and we also know that you were ordered to pay alimony as part of the settlement. The divorce resulted from your affair, so it's only natural." My sister-in-law shot daggers at the lawyer who spoke, retorting, "I'm not required to pay alimony now, am I? There's no one left to pay." She attempted to sound confident, but it was clear that she was rattled. The lawyer, unfazed, responded, "Actually, the right to receive alimony is inherited, so you'll still be required to pay it. You are now the inheritor." In that moment, the reality of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. I was my brother's sole heir. Since their divorce had been finalized and our parents were no longer alive, everything that once belonged to my brother now passed to me. My sister-in-law's smug demeanor evaporated instantly as the gravity of her situation sank in. She was left speechless, no longer in control of the narrative she had so confidently asserted just moments before. "So it's just me left," I thought as the weight of the situation settled over me. My sister-in-law seemed to grasp this truth too, looking at me with a mix of horror and desperation that made me take a step back. Yet, even with the reality closing in, she wasn't ready to concede. "Don't I get half of the estate now that the divorce is settled?" she yelled, her voice rising. One of the lawyers, looking exasperated, replied, "Didn't you receive a substantial amount when the divorce was finalized?" "We have a receipt on record," he continued. "Also, the house he purchased before the marriage is not subject to property division." I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction as I watched the lawyers calmly and firmly lecture her. No matter what arguments she threw their way, they had a ready response. At one point she recalled something and chuckled, saying, "But there's the life insurance. I should still be the beneficiary." Her misplaced confidence in the face of defeat was almost admirable. She explained how she had changed the beneficiary on Johan's life insurance policy to herself. But the lawyer quickly shut that idea down. "Jan was meticulous," he said. "I believe he changed the beneficiary when the divorce was finalized." Intrigued, I rummaged through my brother's belongings and found the life insurance policy. Just as I was examining it, my sister-in-law snatched it from me, scanning the document anxiously. Her shoulders slumped as she handed it back, confirming what I suspected. The beneficiary was listed as me. Realizing she was getting nowhere, my sister-in-law finally let her true feelings spill out. "I married a lawyer because I thought he was wealthy," she shouted. "All I got was a small settlement, and now I have to pay alimony. This was a huge mistake." With a grim expression, one of the lawyers responded. Johan felt the same way. He regretted ever going to that marriage counselor and considered it the biggest mistake of his life. My brother had never confided such feelings to me, but it was clear he had been honest with his colleagues. With nothing left to say, my sister-in-law stormed out of my brother's house, leaving behind whatever dignity she had. In the following days, she was required to pay alimony in installments, but without a job, she couldn't manage it. Desperate, she began searching for work, but her lack of experience and poor work ethic led her to quit almost every job immediately. Eventually, she re-registered with a marriage counseling agency, hoping to find another wealthy man to swindle for quick cash. Her scheming didn't go unnoticed. She managed to deceive a wealthy man into giving her money, claiming she needed it for their marriage. However, he quickly caught on to her deceit and reported her to the police. My brother's firm lawyer informed me of her fate. To be honest, no alimony was ever paid to you, he admitted when I came to discuss the situation. Now that she's been apprehended, it's unlikely you'll see any alimony payments in the foreseeable future. I wasn't particularly interested in the alimony anyway. What mattered more was seeing her face the consequences of her actions. I believed my brother would have wanted the same. I urged the police to investigate her thoroughly and charge her with any other crimes they could uncover, ensuring she faced the full weight of the law. After unexpectedly inheriting my brother's estate, my family moved into the beautiful home he had left behind. My husband and sons were thrilled to finally escape the cramped apartment we'd lived in for years. My eldest son dove into his law studies with renewed determination, inspired by the events he had witnessed and the lawyer's arguments with my sister-in-law. He admired their handling of the situation and longed to become a great lawyer like his uncle, even though he was never formally adopted. As for my second son, he was the only one who seemed a bit disappointed. With a half-joking smile, he confessed, "I wish Uncle had adopted me so I could have inherited everything."